Sorry, we've just had a few technical issues with the recording system, so that sound had to come through. Good timing right now. So, all right, I will hand it over to Janice to start. So just to preface these next two reports, this is the first time that we've seen these pieces of work come across this new council, and so the team is going to give a 5-minute presentation before each of the items, just to give us a bit of background and information around these two reports and the projects that sit within those, so that we're fully informed when it comes to the debate and the questions that we might ask around that. So I'll hand it over to Janice.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Morena, we're just uploading the right presentation at the moment for item 10.2, the Ōtaki Youth Space report. And while we're doing that, I'd just like to introduce the team for those of you that don't know them. We have Emma Hexton, who's been a contractor supporting this piece of work, and Claire Riwi, a senior advisor within the Connected Communities team. And we also have down the back Peter Campbell from the Wellington Community Fund, who will be assisting us in presenting to you on our next item around the Ōtaki Equity Project. So I'm going to hand over at this point to Emma to just take you through a few very hopefully brief and succinct slides around the Ōtaki Youth Space Project, which is something that there were several engagements with the previous council on, but this is the first time in this triennium you have received an item. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for your discretion in allowing us to make a few brief points in introducing the paper. Over to Emma.
Kia ora koutou. So the council has a role, as you know, in supporting youth development and a range of different things. There's a number of things that you do through your youth action plan. One of the things that came up in the long-term plan was allocating $50,000 for Ōtaki in terms of the development of youth space. The idea of youth space was really, really broad. It wasn't just about a physical building. So that funding was discussed with the community in terms of young people and community organisations. So young people within the kura, within the college, through Ngā Hapu Ōtaki, young people in programs within training, and also with community organisations. So we had a hui late last year with a range of different organisations and people working with young people in different capacities. So whether it was a sports coach or a teacher or an organisation that actually works with young people. We also engaged with Zeal and KYS, who are organisations who didn't attend the hui. The hui was specifically with those who were in Ōtaki, because we'd had a strong message that they wanted to focus on for Ōtaki by Ōtaki. But we also worked and talked through the concept with Zeal and KYS as well, and have support and understanding around that. They also will be connected as we go forward with this particular project. So there are three key things in terms of the development of the youth space: somewhere to go, something to do, and some people to support. And up on the right there, you can see like a few different cool icons. But basically, the point there is that the youth space itself through this project is not just about a physical space. It's not just about a building. It's about Ōtaki being the space. So one clear thing that we heard from community up there is that youth space is Ōtaki community. So there's opportunity to use different places and to connect with different places. And that can be also different organisations within Ōtaki. So it could be a park, or it could be going along to Māori land. That this was really important to be underpinned with youth development outcomes rather than just providing an activity for young people. So we've worked with that community and worked particularly with the provider that I'll talk about in a little bit, but there are 6 activities really that need to be undertaken over this 3-year period. So it's a 3-year pilot. And at that point, we will be looking at how's that going and what is the next steps around the kind of long-term feasibility. So in terms of the first thing is obviously testing the initial youth space idea, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, providing some mobile activities, things out in the community, building rangatahi leadership, work with community. So that's not just engaging them as we're going along, but actually connecting with those different organisations. One of the key things that through the community hui that we heard was that there are existing opportunities. There are one-off things that come up for young people in Ōtaki. There are ongoing things going on for young people in Ōtaki. Let's make sure that this project builds on that and connects those things and leverages off them. And then also evaluation, it's a pilot, so we'll be setting an evaluation framework from the beginning and gaining learning and implementing that learning as we go. And so it's not just we're starting in the end of 3 years, we'll be looking, it'll be an ongoing developmental journey in terms of evaluation with the provider and with council. And then a big part of it right across the time too is investigating the long-term opportunities and options for this. So this is a short-term, 3 years might seem a long time, but it's reasonably short-term in terms of the development of a youth space to test some different ideas with community and build youth ownership around this. So Te Puna Oranga is the organisation that we are recommending as the organisation that provides this. The funding is $50,000 per annum, so it is a small amount of funding in terms of the delivery of this. There were 5 things that we looked at in terms of who's the best fit for delivering this project on the behalf of council. One thing was, and I mentioned before, by Ōtaki for Ōtaki was really, it was a strong theme that came through our conversations with young people and with adults. Expertise, we wanted someone that had expertise in youth development, not just in a recreational space, but actually is underpinned by strong youth development models, are guided by the Youth Work Code of Ethics and have best practice in terms of what they do around youth development. That they are connected and supported within the Ōtaki community and with iwi. So Te Puna Oranga have a very strong relationship with Ngā Hapu o Ōtaki and strong relationships right across that community. That they were fit, and that's fit in lots of different ways in terms of, you know, the staff that they have, their availability, but also as an organisation, where are they sitting? And ready, we wanted someone who was available to do this, obviously, able to start on the ground and work alongside us to develop how this would work. In terms of a timeline, this year, the focus is getting set up, building the contract with Te Puna Oranga as soon as we've moved forward with approval from council, if possible, and then getting into the growth of it. So things like this do take time. It's $50,000 is a reasonably small amount of money when you think about the provision of a youth space and a youth worker. So we're not going to see loads and loads of activities. We're going to see a small incremental development of a project in Ōtaki. There is opportunity, like I've said, there are growing opportunities, really, that's across all sorts of things. The connections with different organisations, the connections with other funders, not to mention any in the room, and the evaluation of the first year as well. So that we can ongoing build that evaluation, that learning as we go. And then right across the place, and the next steps, we're looking at the end of that time with council, the feedback to council to show how we're going, and then where to from there at the end of the 3 years. Was that 5 minutes?
Well done, Emma. Fantastic. So, any further questions, or are we ready to happy to answer questions now? Councillor Spires.
Thank you. Just wondering, how big is the space there? Because I'm not sure how much space I do. Excuse me. Is there enough room for like a pool table or a table tennis table and things like that for young people too? Okay.
So the spaces they're looking at has room for some activity, not necessarily a table tennis table, but the main thing around it is that the actual space within the town will be open for more like a hangout and activity space short term, and then looking at other options that we can move to as well. But the central space is not really the focus. It's more around doing activities out and about. So during winter time, you might things more indoors, but they're not necessarily just indoors within the Te Puna Oranga space. They may be indoors at Māori Land, they may be indoors at the hall or in Ngā Purapura. So there's opportunity to move around within that. So not necessarily just, it is quite small in terms of that starting pilot little space, but it is a much bigger picture. Yeah.
It would be really great to hear from the young people in about 12 months' time who are using the space to get some feedback from the young people themselves as to how they feel and if it's meeting their needs.
Absolutely.
I'd be really interested in finding that out. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Spires. Councillor Halliday.
Through the chair, thank you for the presentation. A couple of just some things I want to touch on. The old birthright space, which is being demolished, has that been considered in any way as part of providing some space in the youth space? Is that part of the conversation at all, or is that excluded from the conversation as such?
It's not part of the conversation in terms of this test pilot, but in terms of the long-term opportunity and feasibility, there are many different options that we could be looking at. There's also, you know, what's happening with your civic centre library space in the long term.
Yes,
There's
correct.
Conversation with Ngā Hapa or Ōtaki in terms of their space. There's a range of different things. And there's many, many things when you're doing and putting, you know, in a long-term space that you need to think about, which is there's location. There's a whole range of things around how to create a space that's fit for purpose in the long term.
Okay. When you started the conversation, you mentioned talking with the community in regards to young people. I'm assuming you talk to young people themselves as part of that process?
Yeah.
Lovely.
So there was a number of engagements, consultations with young people,
Mhm.
workshops with young people to gauge and with a very broad look at what youth space was. So not going to them and saying, you know, do you want a youth space in town? But actually, what does youth space mean to you? Like, yeah. So much broad and also with a diverse group of young people.
Fantastic. Awesome to see the relationship with Te Puna Oranga or Ōtaki. They're doing fantastic work up there. So it's great to see them building the relationship with them with regards to delivery. We've got an item coming up next around social investment funding, which I think is tied a little bit into Ōtaki College. So as you do refer to, there are small pots of money. So I think we're looking at, there'll be a relationship between those two scenarios as such, or not? That's to evolve, is it?
That might be a matter to explore in the next paper.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Because that brings me up to another one. Point 42 talks about external funding opportunities. So would it be fair to say the council will be supporting this through their grants coordinator person that they have with regards to options?
Yes, absolutely. Noting that Te Puna Oranga themselves might also seek external funding to extend the scope of this work as well.
And we'd obviously support that
Correct.
process. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Councillor Cooper.
I just have a couple of questions, and if I'm mistaken, please let me know I'm mistaken. So page 38, number 3, a primary purpose to provide social outcomes for the community. Section 5, priority focus on activities that support activities in the community around inequity with youth.
That's the
So
next
that's
report.
sorry, Glenn,
Is it-
sorry, Councillor Cooper, I made a mistake in introducing this item. My run sheet was different to the actual agenda. So we're in the Ōtaki Youth space one, which is 10.2. That question, if you can hold it to the next paper, which is 10.3, which is the one around social investment. Sounds like a great question, but we'll wait for the next one. Otherwise we've lost me. So I'll pass on now to Councillor Henford. Did you have any questions? Sorry, Councillor Cooper, directly related to the youth space.
I'll come back if I have.
Okay,
Thanks.
Councillor Henford.
Cool. Kia ora, korua. Thanks so much for all the mahi that's gone on behind the scenes on this, and also for kind of keeping myself and also Councillor Coates from last Trainium abreast of the progress, and allowing us the opportunity to also kind of feed in alongside the comments from young people, specifically in Ōtaki, obviously recognising that their aspirations should very much take precedent in this conversation, because they're the ones who we're seeking to do this mahi for. So just a quick question around on page 27.1, 46 around a communications plan, providing the framework for information to be delivered to the wider community. I guess what I'm keen to get a sense of is how we intend to make sure, but then also how Te Puna Oranga or Ōtaki intends to make sure that the word really gets out to young people as to what's on offer, because we can deliver a whole bunch of really awesome things, or Te Puna Oranga can, and we can support them to do so. But if young people don't kind of know or aren't aware of the breadth of what's happening, but also don't, as you kind of talked about, Emma, like don't feel like they have ownership over it, people might not attend, or they may not show up. So what kind of caveats are in place to make sure that happens, and that the word gets out about what's going on?
So in terms of community engagement, that's something that will be developed with the comms team. But in terms of connecting with young people, the focus of Te Puna Oranga is to connect immediately with young people before the development space. So the earlier the better in terms of developing that youth ownership, and the ultimate kind of progress towards is that young people that there are youth-led activities that happen within the space or spaces, wherever they might be, that they build, and that's what I mean by the youth leadership. It is a slow growth, so that does take time, but they already have young people that they are connected with. The other thing in relation to that is different activities connect and attract different young people. And the activity through the youth space is a way to connect with young people. And then the youth development outcomes happen through connection and the relationship with youth workers. So you don't just go along to a youth centre and go and play pool or something, and then you get the youth development outcomes. It's the relationship that they build with those youth workers, and then that youth worker finds out what's going on and connects them with other things as well. So I think the key thing is that it's early and it's involved with young people coming in and asking them, what is it you want to see, rather than deciding, right, we're going to be running this, we're going to be running that.
Yeah, no, that's music to my ears. That is awesome. Just one other quick question, and you showcased this on the timeline you had up on the screen around kind of 2025 being when kind of the longer term options might be brought back in terms of external funding that could be sought, and also council's continued involvement. I guess what I'm trying to gauge is if, say, in the first year it just goes boom and we've got so many young people just leading and facilitating their own community, and we're already seeing that that's delivering some awesome outcomes. Is there scope to kind of move that forward and to kind of figure out what other funding opportunities there might be to just support its growth earlier on? So doing that in the first year, depending on how it goes.
Certainly, if staff in Te Puna Oranga felt that there was a growing and burgeoning need or opportunity, we would bring that forward to council. We're not going to sit and I guess wait for the entire 3 years of the contract to highlight opportunities. But I think I do want to go back to the point that Emma made, that it will take some time to test this, and we do want to make sure that we are following a good evaluation process too. So the caveat to, sure, if there are things that happen that we think we need to bring to your attention or change some timing around, we will. The caveat to that is, but also we want to make sure that we're being robust and following a good evaluation process, because potentially the where we might get to at the end of this 3-year trial could have some resourcing implications attached to it, and we would need to have a good evidence base for that.
There's also two things within that. One is around funding opportunities, and if there is something that takes off, there's no reason why that can't be developed as we go. I think there's something separately around the long-term feasibility, which relates to many things in terms of the sustainability of something. How do you make something that, if you're going to keep that 50,000 in your long-term thing ongoing, how do you make sure that that is sustainable as an opportunity ongoing for young people? But also that if you are going to go for a fixed space and actually invest in some kind of building for part of this, how do you make sure that that is fit for purpose? And that's sometimes that's about how long other projects are moving as well. So that will potentially take longer. So I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah, cool. And I definitely talk what Councillor Spires was saying around within that first year, hearing from some of the young people who are directly kind of leading or who are involved in the development of of this youth space in its multitude of forms. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Mr. Butler.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Handford's enthusiasm and that we're going to have a humongous response to this, and I certainly hope so. And on behalf of the Ōtaki Community Board, we'd certainly like to thank Janice and the team that have been working on this and providing this opportunity for our youth. And also just the fact that you came out on a Wednesday evening to fill in the community board, which I know is well outside normal operating hours. Given that this is such an exciting prospect and that we can start putting this in, certainly my question would be is, when can we kick this off? And what is our timeline for actually putting this in place, and can the community board sort of start putting out communications regarding this?
I think
No pressure.
we need to formalise, if you were to support this approach today, if the council was to support this approach today, we need to formalise some arrangements with Te Puna Oranga before we can start making too many specific commitments, but certain in terms of what comms will be and when. But once that formality is taken care of, we'd be happy to work with the board to look at how we can work together to make sure there's really great awareness within Ōtaki of this new opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you again for your May. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. Councillor Warwick.
My only question is that how do we have a plan to get information from kids who are not engaging in this as to why, what are the barriers to them coming in? And maybe, you know, I mean, there's not a lot of money in there, to be honest, so that can be built on, but it would be good to get, I would want to see that we're actually going outside of the program to find out if and why kids aren't coming into the program. And also I'd like to move the motion once everyone's finished.
I think that would be.
It's a really good point in terms of, you know, the diversity. While it's a small community, the diversity of young people that are in the community, I think it's important to recognise there are, because this project is going to, and it's part of this is the role of council, connect with other things that are going on in Ōtaki that service different groups and different things that young people are interested in, young people in different stages of life too, because we're also talking about age difference. If you create an activity for 13 and 14-year-olds, then that's no 18-year-olds coming to that. So it's age, it's ethnicity, it's what's going on in their life stages. And then what they're interested in, skateboarding or basketball, whatever it might be. So all of those layers will be considered, but I think it's important to recognise that no one project or activity, you know, can be there and benefit for all young people. So the idea is that the range of different things, including what Zeal does in Ōtaki, including what Māoriland does and other organisations and sports organisations, that together young people in Ōtaki will benefit from the range of youth development in Ōtaki.
Thank you, Councillor Warwick. Councillor Coфord.
Through the chair, Emma, thank you for your presentation. It's just great to see passionate people really getting behind a really good project for Ōtaki and Clare too. It's just wonderful to see. I don't think 50,000 is nearly enough, and it should have been done ages ago. And I'm sure you've got the full support of the council. You have Kapiti Youth Support, of course, who've had a presence there for 10 years now, and people like Max Lutz, who would be very interested. He's very involved with the college, and of course Māoriland, and I think you'd get a lot of support for what you're doing, and they'd really like to dovetail into this project, and know you're wholeheartedly behind you. Thank you.
Just a comment about Kapiti Youth Support. So we met with Rachel and Te Puna Oranga and Kauai, so Rachel and Hinatu, the manager there, are meeting together soon to talk generally about what they're doing in their organisation.
That's great.
And they also do referrals as well. So there's a connection between those two organisations. There's a connection between Te Puna Oranga and Zeal as well.
Tremendous. Yeah, you've got three ex and present trustees of Cavalier Support in a row here, so we're all behind you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cofford. Mr. Baker.
Tēnā koe, Emma, Janice, tēnā koe Claire, koutou mā. Couple of questions. First of all, just want to commend you for the work that's been done. Obviously have a personal interest in what we need to be doing to support our rangatahi in Ōtaki. So this has, been a vision, been a desire that I know has been alive in Ōtaki for some time, about what do we do to support our young people. Interesting just mentioning Zeal and Kapiti Youth Services, because the question that I have is there going to be any duplication of funding that this council provides in igniting this project that we're talking about today? So that's the first question. And then I have a message today for council, and that is in the absence of ngā hapu being here. And I've spoken to Ms. Hapete this morning for Kim and Kirsten Hapeta. There's a desire for us to redirect this back through Art Confederation. And I want to make reference to the paper this morning, item 34 under tangata whenua considerations appropriately references young people of Kapiti. And I think prior to getting to this point, and it's acknowledged that this paper has not been before council before, neither has this been before the 3U, that the early steps to get to this point had initially involved council wanting to engage with 3U about what was being proposed. So the question I have to ask on behalf of Tatiawa ki Whakarongotai, what's the benefit to our youth here? And ultimately, Ngāti Toa had the same question at the time. And I know while this is focused on Ōtaki, which I absolutely respect and support, the message today from me and from Ngā Hapu Ōtaki is, could we have an opportunity to consider this paper? I don't know, and I don't know if you know, who Te Puna Oranga is in terms of the governance structure. I'm respectfully acknowledging what's put in front of us in writing, but who provides that governance support for those people that are employed to actually deliver the services on the ground? And obviously know who those people are at an operational level, but I'm interested to know exactly who is this organisation. I would encourage the council to satisfy themselves as well that they know who this charitable trust is, what's their reputation, not wanting to be offensive or anything. I just think practically we need to know who it is that we're funding, who is it that represents the interests that we're talking about here for our youth in Ōtaki, Raukawa Te Auku Te Tonga, Ngā Hapu Ōtaki, and obviously the benefits that might be derived from this project, igniting the same opportunities for our children and our youth in Waikanae, Paraparaumu, Pai Kakariki.
Kia ora, Andre. I appreciate that input. So there is a question there.
So is Andre suggesting a procedural motion to leave this on the table? Is that correct or no? So that it can be addressed?
Councillor, I'm seeking direction from the council because obviously this paper hasn't been in front of Ngā Hapu, hasn't been in front of Tatiawa nor Ngāti Toa. And the question about time frame is important. So if a time frame is set today by you, then understandably Art Confederation will do their best to give this their urgent consideration. And I'm not wanting to delay what you're wanting to do here today because I sense there's strong support for this. But as mana whenua, we haven't seen this paper before today either. And I think it would be helpful if the opportunity was given for the Art Confederation to have the opportunity to consider this and give it their endorsement. And that's what I'm proposing. And that's why the time frame that was asked is also important in terms of the deliberations today. And I'm just conveying to the meeting, Councillor, that from Ngā Hapu Ōtaki's perspective, their message to me this morning was it would be helpful if we could caucus on this as a confederation. And I'm asking for council to give that their consideration.
Kia ora, Mr. Baker. In answer to your question, Councillor Cooper, Andre is here as a member of this committee with no voting rights. So in terms of a procedural motion, he is unable to put that on the table. That has to come from one of us elected members who are people of this. But before we go to that, Councillor Cooper, I want to give staff an opportunity to reflect back on what Mr. Baker has raised and the questions that he's put to us today to this table.
We've had very recent conversations with Ngā Hapu or Ōtaki representatives specifically about this report and the next report within our agenda. So this is somewhat of a surprise today. So please excuse the fact that we've had a little bit of offline conversation, just trying to regroup on where things are at. Our engagement with Ngā Hapu did include a conversation with them around how the views and perspectives of Ngā Hapu would be reflected in the tangata whenua section of this report. So I think it's important to note that from the outset. Certainly, if there are concerns lingering for Ngā Hapu in relation to this, that is a matter that we should have further conversation about. At a staff level, no concerns have been flagged with us following the conversations that we had as recently as last week. So we're in the hands of the committee in terms of what your next steps are in relation to this report.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, there have been no concerns at all raised by me regarding this paper, other than to say that this morning I spoke to Denise Harpiter. I've been in communication with her and Kirsten Harpiter and Kim Tahi, who are unable to be here. They're at a meeting today with Greater Wellington. Respectfully, the request is to refer this paper on so that the Confederation of Ngāti Toa, Tatiawa and Ngā Hapu can give this further consideration, regardless of the consultation that's happened to this point, which I acknowledge.
Okay. So the current advice that I've got is that we're going to move a procedural motion to leave this on the table. Staff are going to have some phone calls and some conversations with Ngā Hapu and talk through what we can do, and then we'll bring it back hopefully later on today so that we can get a decision on this and move it forward. So so that's what I'm proposing, and I'm happy to move that from the chair. Okay, so all right, so we'll just, okay, so I can do that. I can just adjourn this until a later moment in today's meeting rather than doing the procedural motion. So are we all happy with that from me as a chair, that we adjourn this particular debate, move it till later so we can get some clarity and some confirmation. So hopefully we can make a decision on this report today so we can get some action in this space, because it is a significant one and there is a lot of interest in this from around the table. Councillor Wilson.
I just had a question. Yeah, I'm happy with that process. I was just wondering if is there a connection at all between Te Puna Oranga o Ōtaki and Te Puna Oranga itself from in Canterbury? There's no connection at all, just the name.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
It's a local charitable trust.
Okay, so we're just adjourning that item until we have those questions. I do have a couple of questions that I want to put to that, but I'm not sure whether I'll do that now or later. I'll do it later when we open up. I do have some questions to that particular paper, and they are related a little bit to what Mr. Baker put around the questions around the organisation and what we know of them in regards to their governance and their structure, and also how long they've been in existence, that kind of information, which is just a thing. And my other question was related to the key part of youth spaces are the people that are in them, so youth workers, and my understanding of youth development success is in the length of term that you have youth workers in play for. So having the same worker for 5 years working in a space is going to get you better outcomes than one that you're contracting every year, and it potentially changes. So I just want a question around that. So just signaling those questions will come later. All right, so that one's just been adjourned until later in the meeting, until we make some phone calls. So we'll move on now to, my apologies about getting the numbers wrong on this. So we're moving on to 10.3, which is Ōtaki Social Investment Report there. So again, Emma and Janice, and can you introduce the rest of the team at
Yes.
sitting over here for us, so that we, so I guess the rest of the elected members know who they are. That'd be great. Thank you. Yes.
So Claire Iwi, Senior Advisor in the Connected Communities team, and Whetu Campbell from the Wellington Community Fund, formerly known as the Wellington Regional Community Trust. And they are one of the agencies that we have engaged with in developing the proposal that is before you today. So with that, I'll hand over to Emma, who, much like the last report, is just going to highlight very briefly some key points, and we may hear from our colleagues down the back as part of that.
Kia ora koutou. So like the youth space funding, there was also $50,000 put into the long-term plan in 2021 for Ōtaki to focus on addressing inequity. We've done a range of different work and exploration within Ōtaki around how this would be best, what would make the best impact in terms of that funding. So the $50,000 per annum, what we're recommending in this paper is that funding is provided to a fund holder, a local fund holder in Ōtaki, that we work alongside a set of other funders, one of which we have in the room here, who's going to talk a little bit about that, and focus on the Māori community in Ōtaki. So it would be funding, the scope of the funding would be for community by Māori in terms of the scope of this funding. The idea is to put it in place as a 1-year pilot. So pilot it for 1 year, come back to council at the end of that year and explore how that's gone, that testing. I'm going to pass it over to Whetu now, who's going to talk to us a little bit about why Ōtaki and why Māori communities are a priority for them and other funders in terms of making impact on equity specifically.
Oh, kia ora, Emma, thank you. Nā mihi niu kia koutou, ko taima nei tēnei wā. Tēnei te tuku mihi nunui ki nā rangatira tēnei huhuna, a tīnana a huitopa, nā mihi nui kia koutou. Ko Whetu tēnei. Yeah, so Wellington Community Fund is a philanthropic funder. We give out community money around the Wellington region. Our region goes from the Hapu through past Te Atiawa ki Whakarongotai, past Ngāti Toa, and ends up in Te Atiawa, so quite a large geographical region. Small amount of money, we give 2.5 to 3.5 million a year to all of community. And recently we undertook a bit of a research project around if with this limited amount of funding, where would our money have the biggest impact? So based on demographics, locations, needs, all of the things we know, and we research a lot. What came from that was we identified 3 locations, not to disrespect anyone else, any other locations in the region, but Ōtaki was a high profile location, Porirua and Lower Hutt of the Hutt Valley. And the research told us if we spent more time investing in those areas with the people and populations within those areas, we'll have more bang for our buck per se. The other priority populations that came from that was Māori, Pacific, and the Mela or refugee and migrant communities. Not to say there's other needs, but they were the most likely to have the biggest impact. So our research kind of focused us to look at Ōtaki. And more recently, we had a wish or a wāwata or a desire to support Ōtaki in a different way. So we partnered with a few other national funders, the Tyndall Foundation, Todd Foundation, and J.R. Mackenzie Trust. And all of us put a little bit of money together and then trialed an approach to have community groups come to community themselves, and then through partnership with us, how to distribute that money as chosen by them. In that case, we've got an evaluation on that that's pending the report. Haven't got it quite yet, but it led us to think, how would we like to do that a little bit differently and see people like the council and others who have a strong focus in these areas, what that might look like in a 2.0 in a new pilot phase. So here really just to help answer questions or provide any comments to the paper or what Emma's going to talk through in the future. Thanks.
So the focus of the report is to seek your approval on the approach going forward. These are the 6 key elements of the approach. Working with funders who are working with funders who are the experts within looking and funding at equity and making impact within equity, but also leverages a greater funding pool for council on top of the $50,000 that council would put into this. Utilising a local fund holder. So an Ōtaki trust that is already working in this role and has a high level trust relationship with other funders now working as a fund holder. Working from a strengths-based mana enhancing approach to terms of looking and addressing equity. So that's working with organisations and groups within Ōtaki who want to develop positive activities and reinforce their current activities rather than focus on a problem-based way of working. Locally driven. So the idea is that this is a locally driven, Peter mentioned about the community that would be targeted in this funding, being a part of that decision making. Collaborative leadership. So alongside Ngā Hapu or Ōtaki with the funders and with council and those seeking funding, those getting funding, working together to build what this is and how the decisions are made within this. So very much a collaborative way of working. Funding for Māori initiatives. So the scope, the equity scope within this is to fund Māori organisations and groups for community initiatives. The collaborative funding process is new to council, and we just wanted to give a bit of an overview of what we're talking about. So basically local people within the scope that we're talking about, Ōtaki Māori with the equity and strengths lens, seek funding. We would have hui to work out what the plan is around that. There would be that collective collaborative decision making within the process, and everyone reports on impact. It changes the relationship of the funder from we to make the decisions, you get the funding and you report to us, to everyone works together on what is the impact, how we want to work together on this, how much money people are getting within this, and how we are reporting on this to each other. The fund holder sorts the logistics. Their role is not decision making, it's sorting the logistics, and I'll get to another quick slide about that. The fund holder role is pretty much an administrative role. It allows council to, it reduces council's administrative burden in terms of delivering this. So some of the funding might be quite small. It might be $2,000, could be $10,000. They would be the people that ensure that the forms are done, that the accountability is done. They would follow up with the grantees. They would help promote the funding, and they would support the decision makers within this. That's the current role of this organisation. They do in terms of their role. So there's a number of benefits of this, this approach. it allows council to be flexible and respond to evolving needs and ideas and things to address inequity within a strengths-based perspective. It leverages further funding with focused on what council's interested in supporting in that community. It's an opportunity for council to learn from the experts funding within the equity space. It's a new thing for council. We're going to learn a lot. We go within this process and we'll have the evaluation around that to help us going forward in our learning. It's a proportionate process which actually relates to that 6th point around funding best practice. And one of the key things in funding best practice is that your systems are proportionate to what the grantees have to go through. So if they are seeking $10,000, you haven't got an enormous system that they have to get through, a massive form and then a big decision-making process, and time as well is another thing, to make sure that that is reflective, that your process is reflective of what communities and organisations want to do. The reduced administrative burden, that's for both sides as well. That's for the organisations if you do proportional funding, and also for council. And overall, it is in line with funding best practice and the new way that many funders are looking at funding going forward. So being more innovative and flexible in the way that they're funding, rather than having very tight criteria around things, an application form, and you get to receive your money or not, and then you report on that. Moving away from that to a much more collaborative way of working.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to it as well. One of the good things around what we learned from while we trialed this is sometimes projects or programs or events pop up, and if they've missed a funding round or they have to wait 6 months to apply to then or 6 months to apply for something that's happening in a month's time, it kind of doesn't help communities just kind of mobilize and create space or energy or motivation and activities in the area. So what we learned there is, because there was a bit of money available, that when the project or the program was surfaced to the fund holder, they were able to distribute money with our support quite quickly to respond to that, as opposed to having these funding round cut-off deadlines, which can sometimes for community be the biggest burden to actually do stuff, because they think about it now and they need to wait 6 or 12 months before they apply. So that was a big learning for us in that.
And in terms of timeline, it's basically a year of testing this. So Fetu said that their previous evaluation is nearly ready to come in. We would be using that. If council approved this as an approach going forward, then we would take that evaluation, work with the funders, with Ngā Hapu Ōtaki to finalise the details. At this stage, we have an approach. We need council's approval to be able to go and talk and engage with those funders and Ngā Hapu Ōtaki to bring together a more detailed plan.
Thank you, Emma and Fetu, appreciate it. All right, so we've got the background information. You have the report in front of you. Now's an opportunity for questions. Councillor Wilson.
Just firstly, I certainly approve the approach. The current funding, a huge amount of funding actually gets taken up by the administration of giving away the funding. So yeah, certainly approve that. Just one question to Fetu, I guess. Is external funding contingent on KCDC funding?
No, it's not a contingent on KCDC funding. I think for us, and I can't speak for my other funding colleagues, but I'm pretty sure they'll have a similar worldview, is that the greater the leverage of money available to the community, the greater the projects could be. So we're keen to do a year 2 of some description, but really recognise the work that KCDC have put into kind of focusing on some Ōtaki specific things, and would really welcome the input of KCDC into what that might look like for Ōtaki. And I think the leveraging of it is probably the greatest kind of potential of KCDC's involvement.
Sorry. Yeah, my
It's coming
right,
there.
okay. Just to follow up, generally speaking with these things, 1 year becomes a bit of a scramble. And I know, I mean, you guys, you like to have forward funding programs, right? So is the 1 year, do you think is that adequate? I know it's a pilot, but.
My answer is it's a great start. We won't know what 12 months time would look like, because we need to figure out what community needs and the approach and what comes from the projects and the wrap up of 12 months and what that looks like. But the four of us that started last year, we're like, we want to give this a go, because we see that if Ōtaki was able to kind of support Ōtaki and make decisions for Ōtaki, as opposed to us funders come in and say, here's our criteria, this is what you need to do to approach us to get money from us. It's proven there's a lot of potential there. And I think, whether it be 1 year or 5 years or 10 years, I know for us as Wellington Community Fund, we've got a long-term commitment to the whole region. We're a perpetuity fund, we're not going anywhere. And for the foreseeable future, we've got a strong focus on Ōtaki, Porirua and the hut. And then outside of that, we've got a really strong focus on Wellington Māori too, which is separate but it's connected to this kaupapa as well.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Wilson. So, Councillor Cooper, you can come back to your questions now.
I can. Just a couple of questions. I just think that the primary purpose, page 28, 3, 5 through to 19, is to provide social outcomes for the community. Priority focus on activities, support activities in the community. Then it lists inequities. And the equities in Māori, Pacific peoples, Middle East and Latin American youth, and people living in Ōtaki. Is this actually a Māori initiative for Māori at the expense of the inequity, the wider inequity in the community? Or is this just a kaupapa that helps everyone? That would be my question, my first question. Or is this, yeah.
It's for the Ōtaki community, recognising that a large percentage do have Māori or Pacifica ancestry, but it's not exclusive to, because we know that there's a strong community sense in Ōtaki, whether you're Māori or non-Māori in that region, and so this is a chance for the community to keep the relationships building as community. It just so happens that the fund holder and those who are supporting whakapapa Māori, but I know from my understanding of whakapapa or te ao Māori is that it will not be exclusive to Māori only. It'll be to the health and well-being of the whole Ōtaki community. So I don't see it would be exclusive to just for Māori by Māori. And I think when it comes to the equity, we've had to define it ourselves as funders, because lots of people are funding equity now. And for us, equity is people who have what they need to survive and succeed, access to opportunity, resources, networks and supports that enable them to thrive. So I think for Ōtaki, by Ōtaki, this meets the equity thing for us as a funder.
Just wonder whether Claire might also have comments that she wants to make in terms of the conversations that staff have had in Ōtaki, and specifically that point around where it might be targeted, but also the broader focus attached to that.
Kia ora koutou. I think the concern that it will just be for Māori in Ōtaki is not very valid, because Ōtaki and Māoridom in general have always done manaakitanga and kotahitanga to he tangata te tiriti. And so Ōtaki is a community that looks after Ōtaki, and it always will be.
Yep, and that may be so, but I think we need to be careful, all of us, in terms of stigmatising a certain element of the community and the dialogue and the discourse around that. Because if we go out there and say Māori are at the bottom of the pile, I don't think that's helpful. And I think reading this report, that's the feeling and the sense I get from it. And I know it's not the case. I know that I've worked in this area extensively. And I just think we really need to be careful around stigmatizing. It's actually, I'm sure you are, but the way that report read, it was sort of not. Yeah, just comment on that.
I think you can have my assurance that anything that we are involved in that is related to equity will be coming from a place of a focus on supporting and enabling people that are experiencing inequity and disadvantage, but coming from a positive place, not from a place of stigmatization. It's just simply not the way we work.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but yeah, so we need to be careful around some of their wording.
Yep, happy to take your point on that one and assure you that we will be careful.
Do you have another question, Councillor Cooper? No. Thank you for that. Councillor Halliday.
Through the chair, actually take your point, Glenn, with regards to perception. It's an important thing. Look, I've got two things. One of them, I just want to get some clarity. Both of them actually clarity issues. I just want to get an idea where this money sits. I have no issues with any of this, but it's going to be sitting in the Ōtaki Education Trust. Is that correct? And that works in partnership with Ōtaki College. All the schools, is it? I went into the websites and stuff. And it seemed to me that was not that I have an issue with that. I'm just curious where it sits. They've got it works in partnership with, and comforting to know that Kim sits on that board of trustees as well. So it's good linkage there. I notice here there's multiple funders, if you like, the J. Mackenzie Trust, and that works through a thing called Ngā Kai Ko Kiri, and that ties into the Māorilands Charitable Trust. Or is this? I guess what I'm trying to. A lot of different pots of money head towards Ōtaki, and I like the idea that it's going to a central spot with regards to cutting down administration and with regards to that, because I think it gets a bit confusing, to be honest, with regards to things. So I think this is a great initiative with regards to addressing that issue, and I think saving a lot of administration costs and that sort of scenario there as well. But is that the general idea, is to move this forward in that sort of direction, to try and get these little pots heading in that direction to be better utilised in the Ōtaki community?
Leveraging the opportunity that comes from combining little pots to make bigger pots is absolutely what lies behind this proposal.
Excellent. Okay, no, that's fine with that, and I'm cool with that. The other thing I wanted to do, I just wanted to clarify something. In 10.2, we're talking about a youth space that has funding from the long-term plan, and that was $50,000. It was put in as an extra, and it is youth space specific. 10.3 is equity funding for Ōtaki, and that was added to the social investment fund on top of the investment fund with regards to equity funding. Is that right?
Correct. Two
Thank you.
separate funding decisions relating to two separate initiatives.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. Yeah, I just want to make that very, very clear with regards to things. Okay, thank you very much. That's me. Thank you. Oh, and awesome work. Thank you very much for mine.
Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Sorry.
So I just want to mention too that this is not the only investment that Wellington Community Fund is putting into Ōtaki. So if there are groups out there who still want to go through the traditional channels of philanthropic funding for different kaupapa and things that are happening in Ōtaki, the philanthropic funders in Wellington is still available to them. It's not the only thing that we're doing. And to give you an example, along with the 50,000 that we put in last year to get this kind of approach tested, we still invested over 200,000 into Ōtaki. So it's not just one or the other. It's we want to try and let Ōtaki make decisions and support decisions for themselves while still supporting wider initiatives should they come through the traditional philanthropic funding as well. So it's not the only thing that we do.
Thank you. Mr. Butler.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Just because of this being a new concept for the council, Just wonder if you could expand a little bit on the concept of the ngā kai kōkore and who you would envisage being actually in that group.
So ngā kai kōkore is a term used for basically the choosers. And that is a phrase that J.R. Mackenzie have given to this kōrero or this kaupapa around the community that choose to engage with us. We're trying to kind of create a different model of like, please, sir, can I have some money to do our thing, as opposed to we're choosing to engage with you as a funder. And so the ngā kai kōkore or the community groups could be anybody within community who are doing initiatives or projects or programs. So it wouldn't be exclusive. And I think within the comms strategy and the community plan around who's aware of it and who knows about the access to this pot of money or this pool of money would be at the discretion of all of the community in Ōtaki going, have you heard of this? A lot of the conversations I have is, oh, you need to talk to Whetū because he's got some access to something. And it's through that relationship that we create the initiatives and the knowledge of what's happening. And through that, we've been able to kind of get involved in front of some really cool projects. But yeah, so it's open to any group. And having a fund holder means that some groups who haven't got a charitable status, which most funders need, means that they can go to a fund holder who holds that charitable status and has those same rigor, but then support them to get that initiative done, which I think for some groups in Ōtaki who are like, oh, I wish I just had like $2,000 so we could do something, means they could come to this fund holder and then do what they want to do to support their health and overall well-being of them and their community group.
Envisage there being a KCDC representative in that group? I'm not worried either way, but just a question.
Yeah, I think it depends on who the fund holders who went into the initiative in the first instance were like, here's the fund holder, you make the decisions as the kai kōkore and the fund holder. I think this next one, depending on the evidence or the research or the report, I think there may be some advisory support or some support that might be warranted, and that to make it a bit more rigorous. That said, what happened was also we believe as funders was really, really good. But if there was a requirement or a desire for a KCDC representative to be in that group, I think it'll be in that discussion phase of what this might look like in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Warwick.
So my question is around if people have a really good idea, but the fund holders don't have enough money, where will the support come from to council or others to support them seeking that funding? Because filling in the forms is actually a big barrier for a lot of things. So I've got a couple of others, but the other thing is, as a council, when we're giving out public money, what is our what feedback or accountability are we going to have from this, and how is that going to be presented? Like, do we get a yearly report, or because we have,
Absolutely. So the funders too have the same fiduciary and public responsibilities in terms of their funding. Similar. The processes are in place in terms of reporting on impact. So there would be collective reporting on impact, and we would be coming back to council with where the money's been spent. One of the important things around this funding too is around being transparent. So who's got the money within that community and what have they done? What are the activities they've done and how did it go? What's the impact from that? And we can bring that back to council at the end of the year, or we could come back at an early stage as well around that.
And to your point around if there's no money for the fund holder with this particular at that particular time, again, the philanthropic community is here to support that. And I think just for those groups who are in the wider Wellington region and recognising the Waikanae, Paraparaumu, Paikakariki communities who may not have charitable status or anything like that as well, Wellington Community Fund, shouldn't really say this, but I'm going to, we have the ability to have a fund holder. If a community group has a fund holder, we can support that fund holder, because that's why a project or pilot like this is not not too foreign for us as an organisation. So for communities in those regions, in this region here that you serve, if they've got an idea but don't have charitable status, if there's a fund holder that they want to partner with, we can release that money to the fund holder on their behalf for the community group. So to your point, if there's a group that wants money but don't have status, as long as they have a fund holder, we can potentially support them. Can't guarantee, but that process is open to them.
Kia ora. Are you done, Councillor Warwick? One more? I'm just conscious of time. We're hitting our 11 o'clock break time. So just
With
want to
regard to administration, what costs are involved and do we bear those costs? Or does that come out of the fund holder pool of money?
that is in the report. There is a small percentage that is assigned to the administration for the fund holder. Does lead me to a question in regards to that, is what percentage is that?
That's yet to be worked out because we haven't engaged with the funders at that level of detail, but there is precedent from last time.
Okay.
Last year it was a 15% percentage. 15% was the percentage for the fund holder to administer this. I think depending on the large of the pool, the size of the pool, we could kind of talk to the fund holder about that as a slightly reduced one, depending on the pool of money available, I think. But that's again, as we work with the fund holder and the funders about what their expectations are around that.
Okay. That seems like more than a small percentage, just observation. We've got online Huriwai. Here's a question. Welcome, Huriwai.
Kia ora. Sorry, I'm just having to stay home today because I was sick after traveling. My question is, just trying to, it's more run around clarity. So I'm just trying to work my head through it. So the idea in terms of option one, is it sort of like club funding insofar as different or multiple funders fund into this sort of central pot, and then applicants come in seeking funding for their ideas from that central pot? I'm just checking, is that the right approach to what you're seeking the endorsement from council on?
Yes.
And then in terms of the weaknesses noted in the report, sorry, I'm just trying to check which one it is. Is it 19.3? Noting, of course, how you state that this type of approach is different and new for council, and you have noted the time expense that would be involved. I'm just trying to get a sense of confidence or assurance as to how long would this sort of take for council to sort of get enough confidence that this is the right approach to go down, as opposed to the other options that you have outlined.
In terms of the research that's been done and the conversations that we've had, there's enough, the staff team have confidence in the approach at a high level and what we've provided to council. The details in terms of how the decision making would work, the logistics and how we would work out how the process works is something that needs to be figured out. So that in terms of timing is something that would take a couple of months. The funders, from our understanding, are keen to go. There's no issue with getting funding going. It's just that we need probably, I would say, 2 months for the first part of this to make sure that the paperwork lines up. So remembering that we already have things in place that we'll be tweaking. We're not starting from scratch with the funders. We've been provided with the collective agreement that they've used previously. We've been provided with reporting templates that they've used previously, and we've gone over those things. So it's a matter of tweaking and making sure it works and it's fit for council's purpose going forward, rather than starting from scratch on those things.
And then just because I just noted from the report where it says 50,000 per annum, but in this first tranche you're looking at 100,000 carried over from FY 22-23 and then inclusive of 23-24. But is there insofar as, just in case timing does go down a track that is unhelpful, is there a risk insofar as a certain decision has to be made before that any part of that funding gets lost, or is it secured?
The funding is available in our budgets for future years. I think what we're pointing to is that this approach is something that we would take a look at. But if your question is the ongoing funding of $50,000 per annum for investment in Ōtaki focused on equity, if that's at risk, I wouldn't say that it's at risk any more than any other part of our council budgets, where we have to look at whether they continue to align with the direction set by the council of the day.
Thank you.
Kia ora, Huriwai. Councillor Pravanov. This will be our last questions I've got, apart from mine.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, everyone who's played a part in getting this paper to us today, and really exciting project. I have two lines of questions. My first one follows up, was actually very similar to what Councillor Warwick's. I'm looking in here in terms of how the reporting occurs, but I suppose to me, I'd also want to see that there are measures in place so that you can actually report against those. So you actually know that the money that is being put here is actually working. And in the report here, it's not actually that clear. And it actually even says about how potentially, I think it's on page 23, about evaluation is going to be iterative, so it may well change. So I just sort of, maybe it's the subject matter, but is it difficult to put measures in place now that you can actually, the targets in place now that you can actually measure against to see that this money is actually going to be well spent? My first question.
You referred to page 23, which is the Ōtaki Youth Space Report, so the previous item. But
sorry, yes, I think it was a bit later on.
I guess in reference to this Ōtaki social investment piece.
Yes.
There's a prioritisation process involved in this, and there will be measures set for assessing whether or not the outcomes that the investment seeks to achieve has achieved, and that is something that we apply to our overall social investment program, and something that you'll hear more from us on in the lead up to the next LTP. But I think measurement and evaluation of whether this approach, from a council perspective at least, is achieving what we thought that it would achieve, is inherent in the process that we've outlined for you today.
Okay, thank you for that. My second question, and it was touched on here before in terms of, so this fund is actually basically going, it's the Ōtaki Social Investment Fund. You made the comment that that there may be other areas in the kapiti that could apply for it if they have organisations that are available to do that. So one of them, I suppose, the issues I've raised before is in Waikanae. There's some areas there that have a lower deprivation figure than even Ōtaki, but there's actually no organisation there. Are there ways and means of actually facilitating such an organisation so that, that group and possibly one of others can be...
Pravanov, I think this is probably beyond the scope of this report in terms of that question. Could we take that offline and have a chat with staff about that particular thing related to that? That would be fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you. Great. So I just have one question. We're talking about a 1-year pilot, and that's 50K, but we're talking about putting 100K in before we've done the 1-year pilot. That doesn't seem to align with what a pilot is about in my thinking.
It's not putting the whole 100K in at the same time. So it would be putting in 50,000 once we've figured out and finalised the process with the funders and with Ngā Hapū Ōtaki. So it's robust and it sits well under our social investment priority and the measures and the framework that we have in place around that. So first of all, it's $50,000, and then evaluation happens throughout
So it's an ongoing process. There could be a point 6 months in when you come back to council and say, this is where we're at with evaluation. The idea, the framework behind it is a developmental. So developmental evaluation is an ongoing process. Month by month, we'll be looking at it. And there's 2 levels within that. It's how's it working as a structure for council and the funders and Ngā Hapu Ōtaki, and what's the impact that we're making within this. There's kind of 2 parts to that. And then the second $50,000 would be later within that financial year to be able to come into that pool of funding.
Great, thank you. So my my second probably question around this is a specific around when do we expect to have some reporting back to council around the review and the ongoing evaluation of this project? I assume it potentially would go through the Social Sustainability Committee first?
Correct. So we are asking you to endorse the approach today. We would work via the Social Sustainability Subcommittee in the first instance to provide updates about how things were tracking. If, as part of our ongoing evaluation that Emma has just described, we had concerns about the approach, if you were to approve the approach today, if at any point through our ongoing evaluation we had concerns that we thought required a different decision, we would bring that back to council as well.
Fantastic, thank you. I see no other questions, so although Councillor Wilson, are you offering to move the recommendations?
No, I think our Ōtaki councillor might want to do that, but I'm assuming are you asking for a specific recommendation on one of the options? So I'm assuming that the collaborative option 1 seems.
So the recommendations outline that we are endorsing option 1.
Yeah.
So that's A.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was what, but just a very quick point of clarification. At the time that this was designed, Ōtaki was different than it is now. So Ōtaki used to include Peka Peka and Te Horo, and it doesn't anymore. That's now Waikanae. So does the scope of this on, yeah, not Peka, but so does the scope of this, has the geographical barrier changed?
I think you're referring to changes to ward boundaries that happened as part of the representation review. I think the focus for us with Ōtaki projects is more aligned to how the Ōtaki community defines itself and where its boundaries are, rather than where the local government commission defines the boundaries of Ōtaki.
Yeah, that's great, but the Ōtaki community is already defining itself in different ways. I'm more interested in how we define it. So, so the question is, does this include Te Horo, or doesn't it? And regardless of what the government, anybody sets a boundary, what is the cultural boundary? I mean, the former councillor who was driving some of the stuff actually lived in Te Horo. He was the Ōtaki councillor. He lived in Te Horo. And if you asked him, as far as he was concerned, yes, Te Horo was certainly part of this. So my question is it?
I think in all honesty, we haven't defined the boundaries to that degree yet, but I'm going to ask whether any of the other staff in the room have a perspective they want to offer.
Because I don't know the answer.
Kia ora. Te Horo is still part of Te Horo is still, but also when we're looking at servicing our communities, it would depend on where the organisation is placed, and most organisations in Ōtaki will service other areas outside of the direct Ōtaki, which would include Te Horo.
Great. Councillor Halliday, can I ask, is this a question or are you moving?
Point of clarity, actually.
Okay, I had said we were into the end of that, but I'll allow it.
Number 29 on page 34. How I read that, and I have no issue with this, is there's actually $100,000 that goes in the first year with the $50,000 following. We're talking about $50,000 in the first year with $100,000 following. but the funding was for the first 2 years, 2022, year ended 2022, 23. That's 100,000. In theory, that's what we're putting in to start with. And then the other 50,000 will come after that. But that's not what I've heard, is it?
So the confusion, do you want to answer it, or? Confusion is because we've got 2 financial years involved, one of which is about to finish in 6 weeks' time.
Correct.
And we need to get $50,000 out of our
Actually, we
budget.
need to get 100,000 out because this is actually the 2
No,
years,
they
this
just-
year and the previous year.
No, it's only 2022, 23. So it's this financial year that finishes is the first 50,000. The next 50,000 starts July 2023 through to June 2024.
Which is the final year of the long-term plan.
No, well, it's not of the social investment funding though. Social investment funding, year 1 finishes
I stand
June.
corrected. Thank you very much.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Councillor Halliday. So I'm looking for a mover. I will take Councillor Warwick as the first mover. Can I have a seconder for the recommendations? Hold up, I will get the seconder, which is Councillor Wilson. You have a right of introduction, Councillor Warwick.
I just wanted to ensure that Andre is happy with this.
I'm supporting an excellent report and obviously want to demonstrate my bias for Ōtaki.
So anything more, Councillor Warwick? So we're open for debate. Anyone? I'd like to throw just a thought in here. I'm conscious we are well over my 11 o'clock time. In terms of debate, I just want to endorse and welcome the work that our staff have put in and the funders have put into exploring new options around funding. From my work in the social and community sector across the Kapiti district, funding and how that works has been very difficult for organisations for a long time. And this excites me to see that we are talking about doing things differently. I can talk from my personal experience that being a fund holder to help another organisation get started and get their good idea happening is possible. It involves a level of collaboration that we are looking to encourage and invite across our communities between organisations where there is a lack of protecting my patch, and now I'm supporting great ideas that produce great outcomes for our community. And I'm excited by the fact that Council is signalling that we want to support a shift around funding. And I would hear from my sector and my experience of that there would be a fully resounding, yes, I agree, with exploring these different options. So thank you to our staff and to the funders for bringing this to the table and presenting this as something we can endorse today. Councillor Halliday.
I was going to try and say something like that, but I think you very eloquently put it in a way that I don't need to add anything at all. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Councillor Wilson.
Basically what you said, except that as the chair of the grants committee for council, and we have various grants committees, which is an innovative approach actually. So offline, I'd love to have some more chats with you, Fitu. I think this presents a whole exciting range of opportunities for us as funders and on behalf of those who get the funding. So, boom.
And in the light of everyone continuing on from everyone's conversation so far, I think that potentially the learnings we have from this could inform future planning. And this is probably the ultimate outcome of a decision that was made, very difficult decision that was made about 7, 8 years ago to shift our funding model towards social investment funding, which was not well received at the time, but it has opened the door for this further conversation around a complete look at the model of funding that we use and how that produces the outcomes that we so desperately need in our communities. So having said that, thank you to our mover and seconder. No other debate. Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour, aye. Against? That is carried. And at that point, we will adjourn the meeting for our 15-minute break. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Kia ora koutou, welcome back. Thank you for being prompt, team. We're doing well. Hope you've got all the coffee and the sweet bits that you need, or the refreshment you need to be able to move on. Because we're going to move on. In the agenda, I'm going to drop back to one of the items that we adjourned prior to the break, which was related to matter of an urgent nature and the remit to LGNZ regarding KiwiSaver. So you will have all seen the remit that Hamilton City Council put in, and note that that remit does not specifically outline the idea of employer contributions in it, but I have been assured that that has been added to it when it was sent to LGNZ. So the close for remits was yesterday. The Mayor exercised her decision rights and said that we won't put a remit in, but we'll support the Hamilton one. So at this stage, I'm happy to go with the recommendations that were on the screen earlier. Can we get those back up on the screen, please? With the note that the Mayor, we would like the Mayor to reflect at the LGNZ conference and the chance to vote on this remit that it is reflective of the recommendations that we have supported through our Strategy and Operations Finance Committee last week, and the recommendations there, which are listed behind me now. Okay, so I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for those recommendations. I've got Councillor Wilson moving, Councillor Hanford seconding. Any debate? Okay, Councillor Wilson with his.
Kim raised a point. Well, this is just for some clarification around it, that the how this might fit in with external representatives, and particularly mana whenua representatives, and it seems to not be part of this. I guess that can be raised on the floor, and probably will be at the conference. But it was whether or not that was something that we thought should have been included in this. And I guess at that stage it gets really tricky, because what equals external and time periods. And, anyway, Steffi looks like she's got an answer to that question.
Sure.
So the way that mana whenua representatives and other appointed representatives are remunerated is directly through councils. So LGNZ will not be able to lobby the central government agency on that. It would have to come back to each individual council on how they do that. So if the remit was accepted by LGNZ and then was put on their work plan, and the decision was made to remunerate elected members, what we would then do is look at that point, and whether we apply that to appointed members as well.
As always. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Hanford.
Just wanted to really briefly note that Community Board member Jackie Elliott has been made aware of this being the course of action, and she's happy with that. Just noting too that she was the one who kind of championed this remit coming to the table, so just wanted to provide the assurance to the table that she's been involved with this conversation alongside myself and the Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hanford. It's important that we note the work that Jackie has put in that space. Councillor Halliday.
Through the chair, certainly agreeing or supporting comments made by Councillor Hanford. Look, I've been a long advocate with regards to remuneration in relation to local government. I don't think the remuneration is satisfactory. This is a small part in that process, but I think it's an essential part as well. And the provision needs to be at point of pay, if you like, rather than being something that councillors have to sort out themselves. Again, I reiterate that in the I'm just hoping I'll be reminding the mayor going into the local government conference that the a prerequisite for us was around the council contribution to that, just like it happens with normal wages, which is not picked up there, but being told that isn't included in that. And the mayor will have the at the time, I'm sure, have the right to exercise or be able to exercise the right to make that as a recommendation if it's not included in the way that we're happy with as such, and that can be discussed at the table then.
Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Mr. Larissy.
I'm going to apologise in advance through you, Mr. Chair. I'm about to make myself very unpopular with my colleagues. I don't believe that this is necessary. As elected members, we're effectively treated as independent contractors, and as such, we're responsible for paying our own tax. We're responsible for paying our own KiwiSaver entitlements. I don't see why we should be treated differently, or especially when it comes to the KiwiSaver employer contribution. We aren't employees, so why should we get an employer contribution? There might be an argument around parity in terms of if employees get it, why shouldn't we as independent contractors? I guess my response would be, as independent contractors, we can claim expenses that employees can't, and have all sorts of benefits in terms of how we manage our tax liabilities that employees can't. So I don't think that this is necessary, and it either adds cost to the ratepayer or the taxpayer, wherever the money's coming from, or local government turns around and says, well, it's included in your payments. So in which case that reduces your remuneration. I do accept Councillor Halliday's point that there are issues around remuneration, and there needs to be a broad discussion around that. And there's all sorts of issues there. But I don't believe that the employer contribution is necessary, and it doesn't make sense. Thank you. Sorry, guys, I had to say it. I didn't want to, but I had to.
Thank you, Mr. Larissy. Just another point from me, and then we'll go to the vote on this, is I know that the mayor is planning to write to the minister in regards to the thoughts that this table has expressed as well around this issue, noting Mr. Larissy's comments, your objection to that at the moment. So I'll consider there's no further debate around that, and that we're happy to go to vote on these recommendations, A and B, that are on the screen up there. The only comment I would make is A has that twice at the top, but there, so we just only need one that, I think, probably. Yeah, cool, great. Yes, really emphasizes it for us. So all those in favour? Wow, that was overwhelming. All those in favour? Against? We'll carry those recommendations. Thank you. I did say against. Okay, just hold here. Is someone calling for a division? Okay, so there's a division being called. Mr. Mellon, you can step into this this conversation.
Are we the for or against?
So everyone's, let's raise their hands, everyone who's for this particular recommendation.
So Councillor Warwick, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Halliday, Councillor Pravanov, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Hanford, and Councillor Cooper. No, Kirby, sorry.
Yeah, that's me. Did you get 2 votes? Oh, sheesh. Against? Hands up.
Councillor Coford, Councillor Spires.
That's us.
That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Mellon. Well done. That's carried.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, just a point of clarity here. If this remit went yesterday, what was the point of that vote?
It's a recommendation. It's administrative. We're putting it on the record.
Lovely, thank you.
So yes, potentially you could say it was a waste of time, but it is administrative and we need to put it out there for the records moving forward. So we've got staff here for what was 10.5, and I've pushed it up the agenda to 10.4, which is the 2023-24 annual plan adoption of fees and charges. So welcome Paula and Jean.
Good morning all. I'm hoping you'll take this report as read and just open up to any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? See one light with Councillor Halliday.
Through the chair. On page 68 on the agenda, I'm sorry, I'm just going to do it. Just let you know, I have made council officers aware of this and they have addressed the issue. But I wanted to, just for public record. On page 68, we have a table there for swimming pool charges. So I've been made aware by a community board member that the community service card holder and the 65-year-old age hen trip is not a concession card. There's no discount in relation to that. But I would ask Mr. Mendonca to perhaps respond to that.
Thanks, Councillor. So you're quite right, Councillor. The community centres, community services cardholder 10 swim and the 65 years of age and over 10 swim is not actually a concession charge. It's actually just a 10 trip ticket. So it shouldn't actually be. It should actually have a different heading. So we will, with your leave, we will change the heading. I just make the point that the reason it doesn't need to be a concession is because the actual cost to entry for those people is already very low. It's $3.40. So in terms of the actual concession, that is where it is bedded in the actual base fee rather than in the 10 trip ticket itself. Thank you.
More than happy with that. Thank you very much for the response.
This might be obvious to everyone else, but on page 50, it says list of building consents issued each week, email. Does that mean that other people can get a list of all of the consents that go out? You can request it if you're a developer or something. Who's that for?
I think either
Yeah, but that's elected
Mr.
members.
Jefferson can offer some clarity to that.
Thanks, Councillor. Through the nearly chair. If you're comfortable, I'll take that offline because I don't actually have the answer to that. I have invited Mr. Cody to join us. I think he's on his way. So if he pops in, we might be able to redress that. But yeah, look, I don't have the detail there. Thank you.
Them stamped and addressed envelopes for every year, and they'd send it to you for no charge. But now it's a charge. So yes, you can get a copy of other permits, other consents. What's that? You can spy, yes, indeed, if you want.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, given that we had the opportunity to traverse most of these ones before, but I did notice also on the swimming pool thing, just looking for a basis for comparison, because there's a former non-Olympic swimmer and the current non-Olympic swimmer. I don't actually swim that much, but I did notice, like, so the adult fee here is $570. In Tawa, it's $680. So, we're well better off there. But I did notice in Tawa, there's no charge for a spectator, whereas we charge for that, and that came up. So presumably there's a validation for that, and presumably somebody's got some, that's not a new charge. Is that a new charge?
Yes, just for the Waikanae facility.
Yeah. And it'd be interesting to see what the revenue or if in fact that becomes a barrier to anybody. But it'll be monitored. Yeah.
Fantastic. Councillor Pravanov.
I thank you through Chair. Thank you for this report. I just want to follow up on a question that was raised and just in relation to dog tags, ones that were issued last year, which are actually meant to last for a number of years. I just want to double check that they can be replaced for free if they're faulty. I think it sort of vaguely mentions that, or actually with those asterisks. Just want to double check that is the case.
My understanding is we get one free. But James can answer that specifically.
Thank you, Councillor. Through the chair again. Look, I think we'd be honest to say that the tags we received last year, despite all of the promises from the company that provided them, they are not quite as robust as they need to be, and absolutely we would be applying discretion not to be charging for any additional tags, and we are looking at replacing those and something more durable and suitable, but still not plastic. So I hope that gives you the assurance we won't be charging.
Thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Did you have another?
I just wanted to add, I did follow that up,
Yes.
and the charge is only when they lose it or the dog chews it up.
Yes.
I have added a footnote
Yes,
in
yeah,
the
okay.
fees.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you for that. So my other question, it's funny how swimming pools can raise all sorts of questions. So on page 68, it mentions aqua fit classes, individual prices and concession cards. I have to, in the break, I just went over to the swimming pool and there's a sign there that's saying it includes a free spa, 15-minute spa afterwards. And I just want to be clear, I just want to understand how that works in Waikanae when the spa is not actually working, because potentially they're actually not getting value for money. My understanding there's a spa pool in Ōtaki. So just some clarity on that, please.
Can I just remind our elected members that we did email out Thursday last week about operational questions to be forward and before this meeting so that we wouldn't spend forever dealing with operational questions. So those of you who have lights on, I'll allow this question to be answered. But those of you who have lights on, please consider your question, make sure it's not operational. I think I was pretty clear last week around that. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Councillor. Yes, it is correct that the Waikanae spa pool is not currently working. The Waikanae pool, of course, is closed over the winter. We are looking at replacing it with a hot plunge pool for next summer. Now, from time to time around our facilities, we do have a change in level of services as we do maintenance or as things don't work. But we try our best to make sure that the pricing accurately reflects what's happening at any given time. But from time to time, things will happen that are outside our control that will mean that it's not possible to be entirely accurate with the pricing. So I guess that's my response. Hopefully next summer we have a hot plunge pool that is as close to a service level as a spa pool as residents might or pool users might anticipate. Not exactly the same, but pretty close.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Councillor Pravanov. Councillor Wilson.
You just wanted to make a quick point because on the sports activities, prior to the election, you will have noticed that there was quite a strong advocacy group around the charges for sports grounds, etc. I thought I'd just trial a couple just to see what the response was. So croquet that sort of, I thought that seemed quite a lot of money. $1,200 per grass court. I've spoken to the Waikanae croquet people who report that they get really good value for money. They're wrapped with it. They don't have any issues at all. So sometimes you can look at things and go, wow, that seems like a lot of money. And you talk to the organisation, they go, we think it's great value for money. So that was just a general point. I didn't go through all of these things, but I think, yeah, generally speaking, the level of satisfaction is quite high. So until I hear the revolution in the streets, just run with it. Non-operational.
Well
observation.
done. It was an observation and questions.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's all right. We're learning, right? It's a learning culture. We're getting better.
I got no chance. You jumped far too late to teach me anyway.
Mr. Olsen.
Yeah, thanks. On the swimming pools, 10.1, the spectator fee for Waikanae. Well, I'm not against the fee at all. Actually, I think it's a great idea because sometimes that pool is overflowing. Sometimes people aren't swimming there. I do wonder about, here it says, and supervising children under 8 years old, and that concerns me dropping, it's almost encouraging parents to drop their 8-year-old child off unsupervised, and that gives me a little bit of a worry. I wouldn't want to let mine off and I wouldn't like to see other 8-year-olds, but when you say that, you're almost saying that it's okay to let your 8-year-old, 9-year-old, and I'd say it's 10 or 11 before, I would be comfortable with that. Yeah.
Okay, happy to note that in our blurbs and operational stuff around that. We don't want to encourage childcare at swimming pools. It's not a great option for our staff to have to manage that. Councillor Warwick.
Oh, just one more question on page 59 about impounded dogs. A registered dog has a second year, if it's impounded a second time in a 2-year period and a subsequent third one, there's costs, but if it's not registered, there's no cost. Does something happen to the dog? Does it get handed over to SPCA or something if it's unregistered? Like there's no cost. No, I'm just wondering because there's no second impoundment cost.
Do you want to speak to that, James?
Look, just briefly, and again, I'm happy, Shelley or Councillor, to talk offline because I haven't caught up with you on page 59. But look, at the team clearly never release a dog until it's registered, and this is that just graduated response. If it's been impounded once, it's going to be a lower rate, and actually they exercise awesome discretion around people who are not known to us and have got a clean slate. We take quite a different approach than somebody who's had their dog impounded 3 times, and actually it calls into question the suitability to be owning a dog at all. And then we look to rehome the dog while it's registered. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Right, I'd like a mover and a seconder now. We're going to take this to the next stage. Anyone willing? Councillor Warwick, move it. Councillor Hanford, seconds. Any debate? No debate that I can see, so we'll go to the vote. All those in favour, aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Jing. All right. Thank you, team, for that. I'm sorry if I'm trying to be clear around the operational questions. Please don't be offended by that. I think we can waste a lot of time in the spaces asking questions that aren't governance ones, and we can do that outside of this space. So it's just something we need to work on and just be conscious of as a team. Part of that is my encouragement, prep your papers early. Don't read them last night like I did. Read them early so we can get the questions out and done and answered. Thank you. All right, we're moving on the agenda. to 10.4. What was 10.4 is now 10.5, which is reports and recommendations from standing committees and community boards. Now I'm going to take this, this report as read, but with the note that there is one item in there from the Ōtaki Community Board, and I'm going to ask Mr. Mellon to give a bit of a background, a bit of commentary around this particular point, just so that everyone's aware. And I'll also invite Mr. Butler, if you want to say anything as the chair of the Community Board in Ōtaki, to this point that they are raising to us as council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just briefly, the reference within the report is to the old State Highway 1, was an NZTR Wakakatahi toilet that was at that rest area just to the south of Ōtaki as you come over, or just before the bridge, I think on your right hand side. Yep. And that toilet was within the Peka to Ōtaki designation construction site. So it was fenced off throughout the duration of the project. As they're coming to the end of that project, the toilet has now been demolished by the project team. And my understanding is the community board would like to see either a replacement or an alternative site proposed to provide a replacement toilet, basically. I guess to note, to the north along the Crystals Bend area, there is proposed a public toilet. So councillor funding, I think it's about $350,000, $400,000. We did receive some funding towards that. So there is going to be a new public toilet provided there. There's also a toilet as you head into Ōtaki on the eastern side. Obviously, the south of the township there's an Exelou just before the cafe on the east. And you also have, again, the toilets as you head out of Ōtaki on the north, on the western side of the highway. So this toilet was provided, I guess, well in excess of, I'm not sure the date, but prior to those toilets being available. And there has also been conversations happening with the PP2O team regarding the Clifton Cottage, the reinstatement work that's required there. Just on the Ōtaki Gorge Road, there is going to be, they're going to relocate the building that's there at the moment and look to either seek some sort of commercial user for that, but that will also include toilets that, as per the resolution, there is the potential again to make those available to the public. So happy to take the resolution in terms of those two letters that are required and see where we get to in terms of an outcome there. But as I say, there are a number of other facilities that are already being provided. So it's probably more about making use of those and maybe seeing what we can do around that Clifton Cottage usage for public access, because that is on the shared path and has a car park also, public car park provided as part of that.
Cam, and then I'll just.
Okay, Mr. Butler, you want to continue with some background for that from the community board?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so this is the community board discussed this, and this was brought to the community board by Councillor Warwick. Both Councillor Warwick and myself have been attending the community liaison groups for PPTO, and the history in that those toilets were always going to be retained. Then suddenly 1 month it changed to, oh, well, we're going to put them back, but we won't refurbish them. They'll just be put back to the same state as what we got them. And then literally one next liaison group, we were told that, oh, they're going to be demolished. And 2 days later, they were gone. So from our point of view and from the community's point of view, suddenly we've lost a facility. Yes, we haven't had it for the last 3 odd years because of the fact that the PPTO area had fenced that off. And they were starting to get into a fairly poor state due to the fact they just weren't being looked after for that time. So not exactly against getting rid of those toilets per se, but in terms of anyone that's coming up from Waikanae, from Te Horo on the shared pathway now has no toilet access in that area. And particularly if we're looking at a car park and that where Clifton House is going to be put, and having Clifton House there itself, there's no toilet facilities available to the public. There will be some toilet facilities available at the kilns, but they will only be when the artist in residence is officially working, so not 24 hours and not 7 days a week. And that's another concern is with if it's tacked on to Clifton House, again, that the toilets won't be available outside of, say, business hours. So we really are pushing towards having some sort of toilet facility at that car park. That's also a natural place for people to come off the motorway as they're coming north in terms of availability. You know, kids busting, need to get someone out into a toilet very quickly. We do understand that, yes, there is toilets going in at Crystal's Bend, but that is across the river and well further up. So not necessarily on the main route that people will be using the shared pathway for. And I'm happy if Shelley wants to expand on that.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that we were promised they would be reinstated. Probably in that location is not ideal now, but people will be getting out of their cars at Clifton Cottage on the South Bank, and they will most likely go for a bike ride or a horse ride or whatever, and you typically come back to your car and want to go to the toilet. So we just don't want to see people going in our nice riverside bush, which is what we'll end up with, because, you know, when you go to a car park, you do expect that there's going to be a toilet most times. So when Clifton Cottage is reinstated, it's really important that the infrastructure supports something that is public as well as the Clifton Cottage, because that potentially will be a business which will be open at the discretion of the business owners, and not necessarily in summer at 8 o'clock at night when people come back from their bike ride. And I just don't want to see a whole lot of toilet paper and crap on the south side of the Ōtaki River, to be honest.
I don't think any of us would disagree with that desire. Okay, any other, so here any questions from councillors in regards to this? Otherwise, we will take it to moving the recommendation and leave it in the hands of the CE and staff to write the letter as requested. Mr. Mellon does want to say something on top of that.
I just wanted to provide some further information. So there is a toilet asset management plan. You'll be pleased to know coming back within the next, I think Mike's not here, but that sets out a strategic view as to how best to manage public toilets, and talks about location, availability, and a whole lot of other stuff in there that would supplement the resolution here today, I guess, in terms of looking at alternatives.
Right. And you will remember as elected members, we have had a briefing on that public toilet situation as well, and the myriad of those that we have across the district that we manage. So any other questions? Councillor Halliday.
Through the chair. Also, not so much a question, it's just a recommendations come through. Is there a process, or can we look at a process to capture the recommendation or follow-up as such from this committee, as such, or wherever they sit? The reason I say that is I respect where you're at with this particular one, but I'm putting up that there's more like going to be some more recommendations coming through as the year progresses, certainly from my committee. I'm assuming there'll be some from Jocelyn's committee as well, with regards to that. And it would be good to be tracking where the responses are at with regards to what's happening from that recommendation. I am aware that certainly in the last triennium, a big concern of community boards was they would bring up a point or a recommendation or something like that. It would be noted and it would disappear. It would be good to capture these recommendations so that there is actually follow through potentially as well. That's my opinion, and that's maybe something we can discuss offline or in another perspective. I just wanted to flag it for the moment.
I think that's a very valid and pertinent point. Recommendations, we do somewhat trust that somewhere staff are taking those and then progressing them, but there's no way of us actually tracking that as happening, and so some things may fall off the radar unless we have that. So let's have that conversation offline. I'm also conscious that an ongoing request for us in these reports that come from our committees is that there is some context provided around those recommendations in writing, so that when the public reads these reports, they understand the context of those recommendations as well. So just noting that is something that we continue to be working with staff to help provide that bigger picture to what these recommendations sit in that come from the community board. Okay, and other committees that are going. Right, can I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Warwick, second, and Councillor Wilson. Any debate? All those in favour? Sorry, hold that. Councillor Pravanov.
Through the chair. So the recommendations are receives the report and it considers the following recommendation. It's not actually voting on it. I would actually like to amend that the request from the Ōtaki Community Board is actually agreed to rather than just considers it. So that's one way of capturing.
Okay. So change of
request.
wording on,
Yes,
so
please.
you're suggesting an amendment to the
Please.
motion.
Yes, please.
That B would read that council agrees with, supports.
Accepts or I don't
Accepts,
know. Some word like that.
support.
Yeah.
What's an appropriate word there? Supports the recommendation. Supports the recommendation. So that's a proposed amendment. Back to like supports. So I'll take that back to our original mover, Councillor Warwick. Are you happy with that change? Councillor Wilson, as a seconder, are you happy with that change? Okay. Any debate on that? No? Okay, so with that amendment, we're putting that to the vote that the council receives support, that we support the following recommendation from the Ōtaki Community Board as listed there, and that staff follow through on that. So all those in favour? Aye. Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Pravanov, for that late interception. Well done. Yes, let's do that. So we're going to move back in the agenda again to another item that we adjourned, which was the Ōtaki Youth Space, which is item 10.2. Bringing that back onto the agenda, back onto the table for us to talk about. And Emma and Claire are going to join us at the table down there in case there are any further questions. So we've done a pretty robust conversation around this. I sense that there is good support around the table for the recommendations that are sitting in this report. During the break, there were some conversations had with our iwi representatives around how we can move this forward and ensure we record some of the process and dialogue that our mana whenua would want to be part of this moving forward. So what I've done with the help of staff and Andre is we've added a third recommendation into this one that is on the screen behind you. So this is the first time you will have seen it. So I will give you a moment just to be able to have a read of that third recommendation. If you'd like me to, I can read it out. I think you're all good with reading. Okay, so we'll go to questions on this new part of the recommendation, Councillor Cooper.
Just a question: if we don't do C.2, what's the impact of that for meetings or decisions? So we're saying we would make it available for them to have which is a good thing, and it should happen. But what happens if we don't?
So that is just a note on there in that recommendation. So in the end, I guess it's really saying that this is our goal, that we want to ensure that through our processes we are creating opportunity and timeframes that are appropriate for the Art Confederation to hui and have input into these spaces.
Yep.
Would that
Good.
be
Yes, that's a good thing.
a fair comment on that?
Yep, that's good.
Any other questions? Okay, no other questions. Let's move to debate. Nothing there. Can I have a mover and oh, sorry, I didn't ask for a mover and seconder first. Let's have a mover and seconder for the 3 recommendations on the table. Councillor Coфord has moved. Councillor Warwick has seconded. Any debate? All right, we'll go to vote. All those in favour? All right. Those against? That's carried. Thank you to staff and apologies for the delay as we got that sorted. Best to get the best result we can out of what resolutions we pass as a council. So we appreciate your patience with that. Thank you. Sure.
Just want to provide a comment. I want to acknowledge staff are working extremely hard to ensure that the papers that come before council particularly are exposing the views of mana whenua. Today's paper, as has been mentioned, it's the first time our eyes been on this paper in a council forum to consider it and the recommendations that follow. So there was no criticism about the quality of the work, nor the effort that's been made to get it to the table today. But the only mana whenua partner that you have identified in tangata whenua considerations is Ngā Hapu, who unfortunately could not be here today. So what we're trying to engineer is a real effort to ensure that where possible, you will see the views of Ngāti Toa and Tatiawa ki Whakarongotai in tangata whenua considerations in the papers. That's one of my primary goals as an iwi chair and as the chair of Te Whakamininga, is to ensure that council can adopt a big decision like this today and know that it also reflects the full support and endorsement of 3 iwi. That way you go out to your constituents out there and know with a degree of confidence that we've done our work to ensure that we've had our own communications and caucus on these matters, and it's clearly visible in the papers that come before council. So there hasn't been an opportunity for today to do that. And I respectfully acknowledge the comments made by elected members. This is an awesome project. But we'll feedback now as well from having the opportunity to caucus and have a look at it. And understandably, there will be a response that will ask of council what happens here in this part of the district in terms of youth, what happens further south in terms of youth. And I know our staff and our senior leadership team attached to this work, this body of work, are very much aware that that's the response you should expect. I want to acknowledge that this has been delayed so that consultation could occur as best as we can for today. In the absence of Ngā Hapu Ōtaki, I certainly want to acknowledge and endorse the consultative process and the inclusion and the quality of the work that's been undertaken.
Kia ora, thanks, Andre. Okay, so we're going to move on in the agenda to item 10 point, I've lost track now, 6. 10.6, yes, confirmation of community board representation to the Social Sustainability Committee is there. So my understanding there is that the Waikanae Community Board has put forward their recommendation to the Social Sustainability Subcommittee, as in Mr. Michael Moore, who is standing down there. And so that is the proposal. That is the recommendation that we accept that appointment. So any questions? No? Okay, so we'll go straight to mover and seconder for the motion here. Councillor Wilson moving. Councillor Pravanov second. Any debate? We'll go to vote. All those in favour, aye. Against? That's carried. Great. Welcome, Mr. Moore. I also just want to again make a comment to thank you to all of our community board members who step into spaces on our committees, and again acknowledge the fact that you are not often remunerated for those positions, but we value at all remunerated for stepping into those committees, but we do value your input and hearing your voice around those tables. So just want to acknowledge and thank you again. I don't think we can probably say it enough for that role that you carry with us in representing your communities to us as we make decisions and recommendations. So thank you. We'll then move on to 10.7, which is the recommendation or the appointment of mana whenua representative to our Risk and Assurance Committee. I'll take the report as read with the recommendation from the Art Confederation through Te Whakaminenga to appoint Rauriti to that committee. I'm going to have to get way better at pronouncing her name than that to honour her. And we value that appointment and the contribution that iwi bring into that space, and we'll look forward to her contribution as she sits on that committee. Do you want to, anything you want to add to that at all? Take questions from, Steffi will take questions. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just in terms of consistency, when it comes to recommendations, by the way, Dr. Rauriti will be a massive contributor to that committee. It's fantastic. The process by which we make appointments, external appointments, and this has come directly from Te Whakaminenga. I mean, I've got no issues with the process. It's the public adoption of these things, and it is nearly always done in public excluded, and there's valid reasons for that. And that is because if I thought this was the wrong person, this is not a forum for discussion around that. It's the public forum. We had a similar situation when we had appointments to the arts group, and so we took it offline. Those appointments were made, but it just didn't allow, I don't think it's ever an appropriate forum to discuss appointments. But having said that, I don't think anybody's going to object to this. I think it's a brilliant appointment, but it's more the principle, and it's what happened last time. We took it offline in order to be able to do that, in order so that everybody felt that they were in a safe space to be able to express an opinion if they had one. As it turns out, my opinion is a very positive one.
We'll take your point, and I think staff do have a response to that. So I'll ask Steffi to respond.
So there's two ways that these appointments come to you. Some of them will have CVs attached, and that would be the reason that they come to you in a public excluded forum, because those CVs, they identify personal information that people would not necessarily like to have out in the public, because they would be attached to a public agenda. However, appointments like this is in a similar vein to the community board reps. There is a name that is identified, and that name will be identified later anyway as a member. So therefore it is done in a public setting, and we don't see a reason under the koima to have to exclude it, because there's no personal information apart from a name. So that's the difference. With the public arts panel that you're referring to, yes, that needed to be moved into public excluded because in fact CVs were attached.
Perfectly happy with it.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I think it is a continuing challenge for us in terms of privacy and how we manage that across the board with our interactions and public state of our meetings.
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Oh, man, that's what I was going to do.
Even second it.
Hey?
Are you?
No. My one's
So Councillor Halliday, you're going to fight for it. You know, Councillor Halliday's moving the recommendation. Councillor Wilson is seconding it. Do you want an opening response there? Any debate? No? Okay, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? That's carried. Well done, we're almost there. So point. Yep. Apparently lunch is ready, but we're going to finish this. Okay. So point 11, confirmation on the agenda. 11.1, confirmation of minutes from our previous meeting. Assume they're read. Yep. Councillor Hanford has moved. Councillor Wilson has seconded. Any debate? No, all in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, I will also now we'll move into public excluded. So that resolution, can I have a mover of that? Councillor Pravanov, a second. Councillor Hanford. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. We will move into public excluded. Can we please turn off